years. So we now have a much more narrow focused mission, which is really on how do you create more value for more people from data. And so with that focus, you can see why we really love this intersection of artificial intelligence and digital public infrastructure. Digital public infrastructure is obviously one of the foundational rails that allow these basic inclusive services to reach into populations that have long been excluded from the formal economy and from public services that they're entitled to. And of course, they also produce really, really rich data about people and communities that have frankly been almost invisible digitally. And that is so incredibly important to AI impact in the way that we're here thinking about it this week. How do you have AI solve real problems for those who could benefit most? And then the last thing I'll say before we get started with our speakers is that I also have noticed this real urgency and excitement that AI is causing, even among policymakers who tend to be very slow moving. And so I think there's a real way to think about AI almost as a catalyst for laying down DPI foundations. And we're going to probe into that a little bit today, but that's my hope, at least, that the kind of fear of missing out on the AI excitement is really going to have countries much more focused and much more deliberate about getting their digital foundations, their digital public infrastructure in place. I'm going to end by quoting Nandan Nilekani, who said just a few months ago at the DPI summit that talking about AI without DPI is like thinking about how you decorate your penthouse when you haven't even built the first floor yet of a building. All right. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce you to our very distinguished first panel. First, we have Dr. Sedina Ndaye, who is, I can't even begin to describe his bio because he has so many affiliations. But let's just say he's an academic. He's a very respected advisor to the governor of Senegal, the government of Senegal. And he has led many initiatives, including on digital skilling, among many other noble initiatives that are quite relevant to this. Oh, and of course, you're on the UN High-Level Advisory Body for AI and part of the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence. Next, we have Kezam Masali, who is the director of UNDP's AI Hub for Sustainable Development. But she also, before that role, spent a lot of time working with me and others on thinking about how to accelerate DPI. Okay, sorry. Okay, and next we have Howard Lakunga, from the Gates Foundation, and he sits right at this nexus as well because he's part of the digital public infrastructure practice at the Gates team, but he's also one of the driving forces behind the foundation's approach to AI. And he's been a very important thought partner for us in some research at DIAL that we've been doing over the last few months. And let's see, next we have Vijayanti Desai, another old friend who has spent a lot of time at the forefront of DPI when she was setting up and leading the ID4D initiative practice at the World Bank. And she's now the director for the digital programs for the World Bank for South Asia. Last but not least, Kamiya Chandra, who is one of the co-founders of the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, and I think one of the most strategic thinkers about DPI that I've met. So it's really a pleasure to have you all here. Now, I'm going to start with you, Sedina. So you know, based on the research we've been doing, which is really through the DIAL lens of how do you help equip African policymakers to understand their choices and the implications of their policy choices around data architectures and data sharing. And so I'm wondering, as you've been navigating this from both an academic perspective, an advisory perspective, and watching the government of Senegal, how do you see these two very important imperatives? One, to roll out digital public infrastructure so that you have inclusive digital economy, but two, to start moving on AI before it's too late, right? Which is a big part of the prevailing narrative. I'm wondering if you could give us some insights from Senegal, and then maybe a little bit about what you're seeing at the global level.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation first. I'm very excited to be here. I will be answering from my experiences with some African government and in Senegal also. And there is a lot of excitement on having AI because a lot of ministries or government representatives are asking what to do with AI, if AI can help to have more efficiency in their work or in their sector, in agriculture or in finance or so on. But at the same time, there is a challenge to have AI working well in this context because the government don't understand how to do AI. They want to do it, but they don't know how to do it. So, and there is a huge gap between grassroots communities. They are working a lot on AI, having a lot of pilots, but the pilots are different with what you should do if you're talking about government. And so this gap between grassroots communities and policymakers, it's why we are seeing that a lot of policymakers, because when you talk about AI in Senegal, the AI strategy is leading by the Ministry of ICT, and most of the need or the excitement is coming from other ministries. So as they don't see things going fast. So and for the ICT ministry, the first thing to do is to build DPI before going to AI. And for the other ministries, the excitement is more in AI than in DPI. They don't know. Yes, they don't know about DPI and they don't care. They just want to have AI working.
Yeah, the boring versus
exactly
the shiny new thing. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a great
and the Ministry of ICT is talking a lot about sovereignty, about having their own infrastructure and so on. But the skills on DPI is not there. So talking about sovereignty, but they don't give they don't have the ability to work with local communities to build their own DPI. Yeah. So it's a big problem, and I think that if you don't have enough skills on the government part, it will be very, very difficult to have the DPI and AI mixed in this context.
Yeah, so you've described some dynamics that are even more complicated than just trying to do two things at once. That's really important to keep in mind. Okay, I've never done this in a panel before, but we are going to take a very quick break and take a photograph for our for our very kind organizers. And so we need our other speakers to come to the front quickly, right? So that's Dr. Bayo, Olivier, and Antonio. Yeah, sorry. All right. And can you squish a little more, maybe turn more? All right. Back to the show. Okay, so Howard, I'm going to turn next to you, since, as I mentioned, you really sit at this nexus within the Gates Foundation, which has been one of the strongest champions of DPI for many, many years, and is now also very heavily investing in how to make AI work inclusively and safely around the world. So I'm wondering, are you seeing kind of the same struggle within the foundation and how you work in a coordinated fashion with organizations that are feeling the imperative and urgency both to build out DPI, but also to create effective, did I say DPI? To build out DPI, but also to create very effective AI solutions. What's your perspective?
Thank you, Kay. This is a fantastic question. Well, I want to start first by saying thank you to Dial and Dial team for bringing us here together today. And I want to say how honored I am to be on this panel with folks that I have tremendous respect for. So thank you all for this opportunity. So for us at the foundation, the way we think about DPI and AI, as we see the two technologies being more and more interconnected, is from a perspective of understanding how the technologies are being developed, how the technologies are being governed, and who are the stakeholders that are governing those technologies. We know here in India, so we know DPI enable us to build the society scale digital rails, which is governed by strong principles of interoperability, strong principle of openness, right? Like the example of DPI you have here in India and in many other countries, the digital IDs and the interoperable payment system and the data exchange. Now, when you layer AI on top of it, you start to open opportunity for personalization, for inclusivity, right? Because when you talk about inclusivity, for instance, you can bring in people that have low digital literacy. You can bring in people that speak different languages. In the previous session, someone was speaking about the fact that in India, there is more than 20 scheduled languages and thousands of languages that are spoken. On the continent of Africa, it's also the same thing.
Right.
So layering AI on top of DPI enables us to bring inclusivity and to make sure that everybody is represented. And we are already seeing some example of DPI and AI working together, creating a flywheel that strengthens each other. Like one example that actually one of my favorite example is SingPass in Singapore, right? Where SingPass is connected to Singapore digital ID system, right? But they also leverage AI to make sure that the population can access thousands of government services. Right? Last I checked, SingPass is now doing 41 million transactions per month. That is really how DPI and AI can work together to create population level scale, population level impact. That's why the foundation we're excited about DPI and AI together.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exciting, and getting that virtuous kind of flywheel going does feel like the holy grail that we're trying to reach in all the countries that we partner with. Which then begs the question of, can you do DPI and AI at the same time? And if so, how not to turn those into silos, because it is so important for them to actually be working together. All right, well, jumping from the Gates Foundation over to the international organization world, Kazam, You now are the director of UNDP's AI Sustainable Hub. Yeah, AI Hub for Sustainable Development. And I think you have a very unique perspective on going from a focus that was all about DPI from UNDP for many years to now a focus that is more narrow on AI. How are you seeing the two interact? How would you say they're similar? How are they different? Do you see opportunities for the worlds to come together?
Hi, namaste, everybody. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here at the AI Impact for Summit. And I'm just reading the theme again for us: welfare for all, happiness of all.
Yeah.
What a remarkable way to start off this amazing week that we're going to have, and bring the focus back always on the impact that we can use technology for people, for society, for communities, and for our planet. And this is why, Kay, to answer your question, at UNDP, and just a brief correction is that, I serve as the director of our AI hub, but I'm also still the director of our global programs on AI and DPI. It's just that we're going through some reforms where you have to, double up and do many jobs, but it's great because it's fantastic to see the intersections, and I wanted to share a few.
So austerity has brought them together. Huh?
It's having an influence on work-life balance. But, sometimes work at our multilateral organizations, and certainly for Harvard and others, is about devotion to impact. And I wanted to say that the arc of AI's beneficial use or for development purposes, which can be job creation, economic growth, better reach of public services, really is defined not by how quickly technology is moving, but by how it's getting adopted, who benefits, how is it governed, some of the things that Harvard spoke about just before me. And so for both AI and DPI, it is through deliberate choices that countries will make, things that our wonderful friend from Senegal touched on. And that is going to shape the arc of impact for AI and DPI. Now, when we talk about the diffusion of both AI and DPI across countries, we know that there are over 100 DPI-like systems being built across a number of countries. We had a fantastic G20 presidency in India, which really brought front and center the agenda and the benefits of digital public infrastructure. But there were also many questions around beyond technology. What is the local ecosystem required? What are the safeguards and the guardrails required? And it's not a fixed goal, right? Because we've seen in the instances of Aadhaar that when you build a system with a digital public infrastructure approach, over time, you have the ability to improve grievance redressal mechanism. Over time, you have the ability for that system to identify where risks are emerging and improve whether it may be, the touch points that need to enable more offline onboarding to, risk of privacy and so on. And that is, I think, the fantastic opportunity that digital public infrastructure as a foundation brings to what AI can do to improve outcomes in people's lives, whether it's bringing radiology services closer to community health centers, many of them in low connectivity areas, whether it's bringing, thousands and thousands of languages spoken by AI, so that actually a student in Uganda or a student in Paraguay can actually use AI to learn better, to sell your services better, to engage in the market economy and move from informality to the formal economy, generate livelihoods, create jobs, etc., etc. So I think the nexus of DPI and AI, as we're seeing in the country, is not detached. It's linked together very much. But of course, there are some fundamental questions around choices, around sovereignty in the form of having choices and having the agency to make your choices, and to being able to see some of the guardrails and the governance of AI and DPI systems being integrated in a way that we look at it from a user perspective. What are the risks of smallholder farmers facing? How do we make sure that AI combining 18 different sources of information to give real-time weather or crop information to a smallholder farmer is actually a trusted source? Who is accountable when something goes wrong? Because it cannot be the user, it cannot be the person, it has to be distributed across these systems. So we're really thrilled that this is coming together at the country level. We also know that DPI beyond some of the foundational systems include AI-ready data, voice data. And when you combine the power of DPI principles with the AI potential to really create change and impact on the ground, I think it's just like going to be phenomenal. So we're very excited at the United Nations Development Program, and we're so grateful for all the partners, including our partners in India who are testing, learning, sharing, because there is no fixed pathway forward. We need to co-design these powerful pathways to create the impact.
That's great. I have about a dozen follow-up questions for you, but we're going to move on. And that's a perfect segue over to Bajanti, who has gone from leading a global practice focused on DPI for many years for the bank, but now you're looking at this through more of a country, a regional lens with a little bit broader of a mandate that includes not only DPI, but the AI innovations. So I'm wondering, from your experience, how are governments dealing with this almost onslaught of both opportunity, but also some of the being able to make these choices and evaluate some of the risks as well? I mean, what we're not able to get into very much today is, if we have governance of DPI happening in a completely different space than governance of AI, what are the implications there? So what is the view from on the ground here in South Asia?
So thanks, Kay. And as you rightfully say, many countries are starting to get excited by the promise of AI, but at the same time continue to work on some of the DPI foundations. And I think on the DPI foundations, it's no longer a question of whether they should. It's sort of where they are in the journey on DPI. We're seeing country after country at various stages of the DPI journey. And so when I think about these two, and while the DPI journey is at various stages, we see even in this region, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, all with the intent, and in many ways already further in the journey, but at varying stages. And they are also, many of our client countries are really interested in testing and experimenting and piloting on AI. And so the question is, these two interconnected, distinct but interconnected, and how do we make sure I see it in two ways. One is thinking about how AI, and everyone in this panel has already said, how AI can really be at much greater scale and impact when built upon DPI foundations. And then the second is, how do we take the DPI thinking that we've worked so hard over the last decade, the more open, modular, interoperable, and then apply that to some of the new AI thinking. So on the first, with, I don't necessarily need to repeat a lot of what is said, but the AI built upon DPI, we know how important data is. And without interoperable data, with clean data sets, AI is not even going to be of much use. But it's going beyond. It's linking ID and data sharing and others. I mean, you think about a farmer having the farmer registry with land registries, weather data, and others, and not only making that beneficial for the farmer for delivering services, but then just thinking about a lot of the innovation that can be built on top of that. And you think about new markets, new services, and how the data trails that they have can then be used for credit histories and then for access to credit lines. And so that's sort of thinking about AI, the layer of AI on top of DPI, and how important that is. But if we move to where I think there's more work to be done, is how do we take the thinking that has been, where the principles and so much of the work over the last decade on open, modular, interoperable for public benefit for DPI that most countries now are moving towards, and apply that to the AI layer. I think we're starting to see some real new innovations, but much more work is to be done. Think about the open network. We're talking about open networks layers above some of the DPI layers, and making that a truly competitive open ecosystem where you can have, and we're supporting our agriculture colleagues, both in this country, but also in other regions. I'm thinking about the role of having different AI applications being able to be sort of modular and swappable, so that you can have, for example, a farmer be connected to market linkages, to weather advisory, to others, but that you don't necessarily have to have a walled garden approach, but a more open, competitive approach. And that's where I really do think many of us, it's a wonderful opportunity at this point to see how we can shape that area further.
I think that's an excellent point. You know, with DPI now for years, we've been wrestling with where's the line between collaboration and competition, right? And I hope that much of that learning and evolution is also going to be applied to AI, where I think that conversation is far more nascent. All right, well, last word over to you, Kamia. And so I guess you are our unique panelist in that I don't think you worked directly on AI. In fact, you're at the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, so you've been able to maintain your focus. So how are you finding this kind of, FOMO and excitement around AI? Is it a distraction, or does it help you make the argument for DPI?
The question is like hype or hope, right? Is it?
Yeah.
That's what we're choosing between. And I think, look, the way that we think about it, AI is replacing engineers. AI is not replacing Swift. AI is not replacing passports. AI is not replacing DigiLocker in India, right? So while there's quite a lot of energy around, oh, look at this cool stuff I can build, which it deserves its due. It is cool stuff, right? At a national level, the question you have to ask is, what do we build in the next few years that can accelerate our, progress on income inequality, reduce poverty, drive economic growth? I think it's very, very clear to me that at scale, the countries that have DPI and are building AI on top are at a very high advantage to those that are starting from scratch, because agentic AI rewards countries that have a good data exhaust and penalizes the citizens of countries that don't have data in a digital form, that don't have consent built in, that don't have verifiable identities, that don't have abilities to close any transaction because you don't have digital payments at a scale that is actually inclusive to the whole economy. So I think it's very clear that that AI needs to build on top of DPI in order to really drive value to a citizen. Of course, you will get your cool agri use cases, your cool, take a picture of your soil and you can tell me. But who's going to now ensure that, you don't just have fancy screen scrapers? Because that's what agentic AI will do if you don't have consent layers built in, if you don't have identity authentication. They're just going to be screen scraping for data. And then the guardrails on that are too scary to think about. So I think it's really important for nations, as they're moving ahead, to really think about this. I think the second point, which I think Vaijayanti distinguished it well, which is like, how can we use DPI before we build AI? But then how do we apply the DPI thinking to AI? I think on this second point, it's very interesting that a lot of the tech sector is already doing this themselves, like without us even nudging. There's parts of the problem they're solving. So things like the Model Context Protocol or the WebMCP, which was released just 2 weeks ago, those two really show that the sector is thinking about interoperability of agents when it suits them, right? So when the big tech sees the size of the network and the size of the scale of entities they can interact with, it becomes really clear that you need a protocol. But the real question for public service delivery is, am I going to buy a black box that's an LLM that's going to be now the foundation of all of my public service delivery? And that's where some of the thinking that DPI put into place on interoperability, on open standards, like for model inputs and outputs, on thinking through all of the different components here, auditability, standardized logs, right? What are the minimal layers that then we can impose? It's coming back to this philosophy of what is the public rails that drives private innovation, which is the core of sort of DPI thinking. So I think on the whole at CDPI, we're very excited. We sort of have started thinking through, it's very obvious in a lot of different sectors once you double click, how AI and DPI can be layered very easily on top of each other. In fact, most engineers don't distinguish, right? There's like, here's an API, there's another API, and I'm just stitching this together. So I think it's very powerful to see that coming together. I think we need more of it.
So it sounds like you're coming more down on the hope side of the equation. That's not what I would have guessed. But I think you make such an important point about the consent and trust layer in DPI, which has been given an awful lot of thought and no thought whatsoever in the AI world right now. And that is an incredibly important part of this nexus, especially for countries that have so much to gain from actually effective, authentic, safe AI solutions. Great. Well, please join me in thanking this all-star panel, and we're going to move to the second session very quickly. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys. All right. Hey. So, Dr. Bayo, please. Antonio, please. And Olivier. Still not working? I'm just too quiet, huh? Yeah, I just need to talk more into it. All right, great. Well, we have exactly 19 minutes to go, so I'm gonna keep us marching along here. If you start okay, great. Apparently I'm very soft-spoken today. So we have a second all-star round here that I'm going to introduce very quickly, then we're going to just dive right in. So first, let me start with Antonio Zeballos, who is the Director of the Digital Sector Office at the Asia Development Bank. Welcome. Thank you for being here. To his right, we have Dr. Bayo, who has requested that I not try to pronounce his name. And so we're just going to stick with Dr. Bayo, who is the founder and CEO of Data Science Nigeria. And last but not least, we have Olivier. And do you want me to try your last name?
Try it. Go for it.
Twagi Borreliezo.
Very close. 60%.
All right, 60. That's fine. First try. Who is with a Dial partner, the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution in Rwanda, and most recently is the new director of the AI Scaling Hub in Rwanda. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us. And you guys are really kind of on the front lines of this work from a couple of different perspectives. And so I'm going to take a few minutes to see if we can dive a little more deeply into a few of the issues that were raised by the first panel, especially thinking about inclusion and thinking about consent, thinking about governance. So why don't we start with you? And this is the rapid fire session. So we'll try to stick to 1-minute answers. And this one is for both Olivier and Antonio. And this is really thinking about the nexus of API or AI and DPI. I guess maybe it is APIs. The nexus of AI and DPI is really when we're thinking about inclusive digital services, both in the public and private sector. Do we have a volunteer? 1 minute?
Let me go for it.
All right, Ollie.
All right. Thank you. Since you gave the 1 minute, I start by thanking Dare for having us here. And I will jump right into the fire.
Nice.
So, I think the most important part to look at in the perspective of Rwanda and most likely what actually should be important for even other countries. The approach of Rwanda when it comes to inclusion in AI innovation is the AI policy and the strategy emphasize inclusion not to be a secondary objective, but more a fundamental or a foundational principle. And this foundational principle is seen or is basically standing on 3 key pillars. The first one is to make sure that inclusion means designing for the underserved right from the outset. As we think about AI innovation, we need to think about women, we need to think about the young, we need to think about even the digitally disadvantaged and the people living with disability right from the get-go. And that being said, even with this, as we go on with AI solutions, they need to be available in local languages. Rwanda have an advantage of having one language for the whole population, but they have different intonations. If you produce any solution in AI, which does not speak or it does not interact in Kinyarwanda, which is the language, you've already left out a good part of the population. So that is the first. The second part is to make sure that inclusion is also actually guided by the governance. So that means that currently Rwanda have a data sharing policy that makes sure that since we are talking about AI, there is a lot of use of data. So how do you protect even the people who do not know about their need for protection of personal data? So this needs to be in the governance and it's there. So it's practiced. So, and the last point is to make sure that when we talk about inclusion, how do we measure it? So basically, we take the approach of making sure that measuring the inclusion is not only about measuring the technical performance, but measuring the impact that those innovations, those AI solutions actually produce in the population or toward the very end. Because the belief is, if you create any solution to save public interest, but you do not have this part of including the digitally disadvantaged right from the beginning, you've already, you are off the put, if I can say. You went to the wrong way, and this is going to cost you at the end by trying to redesign a system to bring into the people you left out at the beginning. Thank you.
Well, and I would argue that's a lesson we learned almost the hard way in DPI, because there was so much focus on access and usage without really thinking about how do you design for, much less measure outcomes for people, which is the whole point. Great.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. What would you add to that, Antonio?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kay. Let me just stick to 1 minute. So I would say just 2 things,
Okay.
and I'm trying to be provocative in here. There's no AI, there's no DPI, if there is no trust, and if there is not human capital that really understand the benefit of that. So to me, those two are I would say, the 2 key nexus that are linking AI and DPI. I hope that we have opportunity of discussing further.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, very succinct. Love it. And I think you're making the point that some of these distinctions between thinking about inclusive and safe, and these are kind of false distinctions, right? They rely on each other.
Yeah, correct. I think that at the end of the day, the people will be using whatever is the solution and the use cases in the way in which they really trust that the data is somehow protected. So it is very difficult for me to think about a successful AI or a successful DPI if there is not coming together with data privacy, with a cybersecurity, more importantly, with a critical infrastructure and information protection that needs to come together.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more that this AI DPI nexus, like the third leg of that stool, has to be data governance, data protection, data sharing, which is actually something that I think Nigeria is starting to focus on quite explicitly. But Dr. Bayo, maybe you can jump in, and from the perspective of an actual engineering firm that's really at the forefront of innovative solutions and works closely with other partners, can you comment on how you think about driving private sector innovation through these government platforms, whether they're AI foundations or DPI?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think first, we need to see the interlock between DPI and AI. I always believe that while DPI makes it possible, AI makes it personal. So we need to move from the registry mindset that DPI provides to the relationship mindset that AI makes possible. And I think it's the interlock of the two that makes it work. AI is a standardized infrastructure. DPI is a standardized infrastructure, but AI gives to us personalized experience, contextualized knowledge that can pick other data points on that individual on a DPI and make it work for that person in the context of service delivery or value construct for an individual. So for us, what we have learned, and great thanks to Gate Foundation project in Nigeria, is that government should move from being an operator to becoming a facilitator, where anything called DPI should be seen as a rail that is made available to innovators to come and build on. And that's one of the success stories we've seen in Nigerian fintech, for example, where NIBS, which is a national infrastructure, has powered the national fintech revolution in Nigeria. But it should go beyond finance. It should go to agriculture, health. And so the fundamental is make the infrastructure available, allow the private sector to build on it. And then what do we see? We see more personalized interventions. So if there is anything to take away, DPI gives us the rail, but AI gives us the trail. And it's that trail that gives the value. It is that trail that gives the economy multiplier effect. It is that trail that allows all the young innovators in this room to leverage the rail to build creative solutions that advance the economy. And that, for me, that's the point of intersection. And that's what we have learned in Nigeria with some of the works that Gates Foundation has supported us.
All right, so we're coining a few phrases here today. We've got hyper hope, possible to personal, and now will to thrill. I love that. Great. Okay. Well, why don't we keep you, Dr. Bayo, in the hot seat, and then I'm going to turn to Antonio to do the same thing. Give us a minute or two of thoughts on consent. And Antonio has already brought this into the conversation by talking about trust as being key to both of these efforts.
Okay.
Please.
So what we've seen, consent, because I'm bringing AI and DPI together, too much information about an individual is now made accessible. Then that individual must be more empowered to be able to give consent. Consent must be revocable, and consent must become more democratic and more digitally literate in terms of an individual knowing that this is what is at stake. So some of the work we're doing in Nigeria is now taking DPI to voice level, where people can access DPI via voice infrastructure in local languages, so that they can use voice to either give access or not give access, especially when you come to informational exchange within data exchange platform. Let the individual be able to call a number in their local language and be able to, and the next question you ask is how are we able to collect so much data set that can allow us to localize? Of course, there's a lot of work that Gates Foundation has been doing around that, around collecting local data. But the startup that I'm a part of, Equalizer, we've gone a step further to say we can even collect people's dialects and accent. Well, how do we do that? These people may not have a smartphone, but they have a phone. And a phone can call. So we can use phone now to collect data as if you are leaving a voicemail behind. We just build an infrastructure that allows anyone that has a feature phone to call, they receive a prompt, and they drop a message, and a linguist can label it. So what that means is that people who ordinarily would have been cut off from using AI power language technology to be able to do consent can now do it, not just in their language, but also in their dialect. Because the truth is, the more personal it becomes, the more easier the whole empowerment of the user becomes. So what we are saying is that there are more technology now that makes it easier for user to be in control, because they can talk to DPI, they can talk to AI, they can revoke, they can allow, they can permit. To the extent that language is now a channel of communication, not necessarily that you can read, you can write, or you can click. Now you can just talk.
That's a really good reminder. I think when most of us think about AI, we're thinking about the downsides, right? The deep fakes and the way AI can be used to improve scams. But your point is that, especially for communities that have long been excluded, that actually there are innovations that are being enabled through DPI and AI that are going to make things much more powerful and trusted. That's great. Antonio, what would you add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Kay. I would say that there are two specific aspects from the perspective of the Asian Development Bank. First one, as I mentioned before, is the human capital. So every time that I'm listening about AI around Asia Pacific, I have the same feeling. For whom? Who is going to be the end users? And we have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, talking about AI is a way to make sure that we are contributing to inclusion, but sometimes it could be also a way of excluding people. And there are several reasons why we may be excluding people from using AI. One of them, I was mentioning, could be the trust. The people, literally, they don't really want to use because they are afraid of that. And this comes together with the need of creating the understanding that AI could be a tool for a particular purpose. So the bank is precisely working on a center for AI around Asia Pacific that is precisely trying to create the awareness on the benefit that this could have. But second, we cannot forget that there is a lot of investment, there is a lot of infrastructure that is required to make sure that AI is democratic. And the doctor was mentioning about the devices. Sometimes the problem is affordability.
Yeah.
Sometimes the problem is that the operators that are putting at everybody's disposal the infrastructure, the affordable, it may come a trade-off between the level of investment that is required and the willingness to pay from the users. So at the same time, we need to come together with a concrete policy angle that incentivizes investment, make the people really understand the benefits that they can get out of that, which again needs to bring together the human capital angle, and at the same time contribute to the sustainability of that investment that is going to be put in place. So there are many different angles that we need to link into the.
Yeah, I mean, all excellent points, but I think you just really summed up the level of nuance and interdependence in both the policy sphere and the marketplace regulations that it's going to take to make this work for people. So I think that the multilateral development banks have a huge role to play in bringing these kind of complicated questions together. All right, so Olivier, we're going to wrap up this session with you. And I actually think this is one of the hardest questions. So sorry, I didn't write it. Yeah. So another thing that in the digital public infrastructure world, we've been thinking about and debating now for a long time is who bears the liability, right? But it's more clear because you kind of understand where the public rails end and the private innovation begins. And of course, I'm oversimplifying. But how do you see these issues of liability when you're thinking about scaling AI solutions? And are they at all related to what you were talking about with inclusion, right? Like, where does the data come from, right? How do you know that you're actually providing services that are going to work for all Rwandans, right? But in terms of liability, when things go wrong, who bears that that responsibility and is accountable?
That's a good question.
Sorry.
No. It's a good but very important question. So there is a number of things that we need to consider as we jump into that revolution. First, we need to have, I would say, 3 key policy choices that really guides our innovation and implementation. And that's, first of all, even before we talk about reliability, we need to think about the technology that we are delivering. Does it have a purpose? Are we delivering to a public purpose, or we are making technology just for the sake of technology? So that needs to be clear. It's like the more you are delivering to the purpose, the reliability, again, you've already passed the first layer of risk. The second part now becomes to make sure that, as I said it before, the data governance needs to be there as an enabler, not to block the innovation. So then the third part is where we need to make sure that as we go through this implementation, we need to have the owners. AI can help us to accelerate, but AI should work well when there is an owner of the decisions behind it.
Yeah.
And that must be a human, not a machine.
Yeah.
So there comes actually, when it comes to the reliability, because there is basically the institutional ownership behind a certain technology or application, then when it comes to reliability, that's the people to go for. That's the best way of looking at it. And obviously, we need to think about continuous improvement, because we cannot deliver a full solution right from the get-go. Thank you.
I think those are all terrific points. And I guess I would only add that I think one of these foundational pieces that we need to be adding, it's not just solving for compute, it's not just solving for language, but I think making the safety standards and impact evaluation frameworks part and parcel of what we're providing as ecosystems feels incredibly important to making sure this works.
Definitely.
Listen, thank you all so much. This was wonderful. And before the group gets up, I just want to make sure that we're flashing a QR code here, because I didn't advertise this at the beginning, but we're actually doing some research on this right now and thinking through the lens of what do policymakers need to be thinking about. And we would love your feedback. Get out of the way. And then I think we have to get out of this room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Olivia.